It started with a smile, the kind that could disarm an entire room. Her name was Alina Ward, and when she moved into the peaceful Willow Creek neighborhood, everyone noticed. The way she waved at strangers, the soft laughter that followed her everywhere, even the way she carried herself, calm, gracious, almost too perfect. No one knew where she came from. No one dared to ask. The HOA President, Robert Hale, was the first to greet her. A man of quiet authority, respected by some, feared by others. For 12 years he'd been running Willow Creek like a small kingdom, the lawns trimmed to regulation height, the houses painted in approved colors, and the people living under his rules without question. Robert had no wife, no children, and few friends. He was a widower, but the memory of his late wife was something he never discussed. To most, Robert Hale was the embodiment of discipline, a man who believed in order, loyalty, and perfection. So when Alina arrived, gentle and kind, it was as if she stepped straight out of a dream he didn't know he still had. At first, their connection seemed innocent. She attended every HOA meeting, always in the front row, offering thoughtful suggestions. She volunteered for the community garden, baked for the neighborhood events, and smiled at everyone with that same soft grace. But what drew Robert to her most was her silence. She listened, truly listened, and for a man used to commanding, that felt rare. Within 6 months, they were inseparable, and within a year, to everyone's surprise, Robert Hale married Alina Ward. The wedding was small but elegant. The neighbors called it a fairytale, the disciplined president finding love again, yet behind the polite congratulations and the champagne glasses there were whispers. Because not everyone believed in fairy tales. Some residents said she moved too fast. Others wondered how she managed to win over a man as guarded as Robert, but Robert didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt alive. Alina became the new heart of Willow Creek, hosting dinners, decorating the clubhouse, and speaking warmly to everyone. She even managed to soften Robert's strictness. Fines became warnings, and meetings turned into gatherings filled with laughter. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple. But behind the walls of the Hale residence, something darker was quietly unfolding. It began with small inconsistencies. Robert would ask Alina about her family, and her answers always shifted. Sometimes she said her parents lived in Oregon, other times in Washington. She claimed to have a sister, then later said she was an only child. He noticed, but he dismissed it. Everyone had things they didn't want to talk about. Then came the phone calls. Late at night, Robert would hear her in the kitchen whispering, sometimes angry, sometimes pleading. Once he caught her saying a name, Marcus. When he asked, she said it was just an old friend, someone from before she moved. Her eyes were calm, her tone steady. He wanted to believe her. He did believe her. But one morning, he found her burning something in the fireplace. A photograph, half-burned, showing a younger Alina with a man he'd never seen before. When she saw him, she smiled as if nothing happened. Just old memories, she said softly, things better left in the past. Robert didn't ask again, but the image of that half-burned photo stayed with him. As weeks passed, strange letters began arriving, no return address, no sender name, just his wife's name written in black ink. Alina always got to them first. She'd say they were from friends or relatives or bills she'd handle herself, and each time Robert let it go. Until one afternoon, he came home early from a meeting. The letters were spread across the kitchen table. All of them opened, all of them filled with the same line, written in different handwriting. You can't hide forever. Robert stood frozen, his heart pounding. When Alina walked in and saw him, her expression didn't flicker. She simply gathered the letters, tore them apart, and threw them into the trash. It's nothing, she said gently, just someone trying to scare me. Her calmness scared him more than the letters. That night he lay awake beside her, watching her sleep. She looked peaceful, almost too peaceful, like someone who had practiced it. The following morning, the HOA office received a complaint. One of the residents, Mrs. Trudy Lawson, claimed someone had been watching her house at night, a dark car parked across the street, engine running, lights off. Robert took it seriously. Willow Creek prided itself on safety, and this was unusual. He reviewed the security cameras, but the footage had been tampered with. The timestamps were missing. That same week, the same car appeared outside Robert's house. He went out to confront it, but it drove away the moment he opened the door. He caught a glimpse of the driver, a man with short dark hair wearing a hood. When he told Alina, she froze for just a moment before replying. "Probably teenagers," she said with a nervous laugh. But Robert saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes. A few days later, the HOA board gathered for their monthly meeting. Robert sat at the head of the table with Alina beside him, now acting as his unofficial assistant. Midway through the meeting, a new resident named Daniel Cruz raised his hand. "I'm sorry, but I need to ask something," he said. "Is it true the new Mrs. Hale used to live in Brookside, the neighborhood across town?" Alina's face went pale. Robert frowned. "Why would that matter?" Daniel hesitated, then continued. "Because there was a woman there, looked just like her, who disappeared 2 years ago after a police investigation. They said she was involved in a fraud case." The room fell silent. Alina stood up, smiling tightly. "I think that's enough for tonight." She walked out before Robert could say a word. When he followed her home, she was in the living room, her hands shaking as she poured a glass of wine. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. She turned to him, eyes glistening. "No, Robert, it's not true. People love gossip. Please don't listen to them." He wanted to believe her, the woman who made him feel young again, who brought life back into his home. So he did. He believed her. But belief doesn't erase suspicion. That night, Robert checked the HOA database for her background information, her move-in documents, ID copies, everything. Her driver's license had been issued 6 months before she moved in. No prior records, no history, no digital trail. It was like she didn't exist before that. The next morning, Robert drove to the old Brookside community. The neighborhood was older, quieter, and less polished than Willow Creek. He spoke to a retired security guard who remembered the incident Daniel mentioned. "Yeah, I remember her," the guard said. "Pretty lady. Name was Alina Marks, I think, worked for some financial company. One day, police showed up, said she'd been part of an identity scam, but she vanished before they could question her." Robert felt his chest tighten. When he returned home that evening, Alina was already waiting on the porch as if she knew where he'd been. "Robert," she said softly, "whatever you think you found, you're wrong." He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time he saw the fear behind her eyes. That night she finally told him part of the truth. She said she had worked for a company that got involved in illegal transactions without her knowledge. When the police came, her boss framed her. She ran, changed her name, and started over. "I just wanted peace," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone, I just wanted to live." Robert held her hands, torn between love and doubt. He could hear the pain in her voice, but also the careful choice of words. He wanted to protect her, but deep down a quiet voice whispered, "What if she's lying again?" Weeks passed, things seemed to calm down, at least on the surface. The dark car stopped appearing, the neighbors stopped gossiping. But one evening, as Robert returned from a late HOA inspection, he saw 2 police officers at his door. They were asking for Alina Hale. When she came outside, her hands trembled, but her voice was calm. The officers said they were following up on an old case, something about identity theft and missing funds from a closed company. Robert stood beside her, defending her every word. "My wife has done nothing wrong," he insisted. The officers nodded, left their card, and drove away. That night, Alina sat silently by the window for hours. When Robert approached, she said one thing that froze him in place. "They found me," she whispered, "but I'm not going back." The next morning, Robert woke up to an empty house. Her clothes were gone, her phone, her jewelry, her purse, all missing. The wedding ring was left neatly on the pillow beside him. He found a note in her handwriting. "I loved you, Robert, I truly did, but my past won't let me stay." Robert stared at it for hours, unable to move. For the first time in his life, he felt powerless. The woman he'd believed in, protected, and loved had vanished like a shadow. But what he didn't know was that she hadn't left alone. That same day, one of the HOA's financial accounts was drained, nearly $120,000 gone, transferred to an offshore account. And just like that, the perfect wife became the community's biggest mystery. Yet even then, Robert refused to believe she'd done it. Because deep down, he still believed she loved him. But 2 weeks later, a small box arrived at the HOA office. No return address, just his name. Inside, there was a locket, the one he'd given her on their wedding day. And a photo of the two of them folded in half. On the back of the photo, a short message was written in familiar, elegant handwriting. "I'll come back when it's safe." Robert's hands trembled, because beneath that message, barely visible, was something else, a faint fingerprint. A fingerprint the police would later match to a woman named Elena Marks, wanted for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. And with that, Robert Hale's perfect world began to collapse. Because the woman he loved, the woman who'd changed everything, was never who she said she was. And somewhere out there, she was still watching him. The morning after the box arrived, Willow Creek felt different. The sunlight was still soft, the lawns still perfect, the air still carried the faint hum of sprinklers, but something inside Robert had shifted. He sat at his desk, staring at the locket, unable to move. The message on the photo replayed in his mind over and over again, "I'll come back when it's safe." Safe from what or who? He could still feel her presence in the house, her perfume lingering in the hallways, her handwriting on sticky notes pinned to the fridge. Everything looked the same, yet everything felt wrong. By noon, the HOA office phone wouldn't stop ringing. Rumors spread faster than wildfire. Someone had leaked the news about the police visit, about Elena's sudden disappearance, and about the missing HOA funds. And now everyone was asking the same question. Was the HOA president part of it? At the emergency board meeting, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The board members avoided his eyes as whispers filled the room. Daniel Cruz, the same man who'd first questioned Elena's past, stood up. "Robert, the community deserves answers. You've always demanded transparency from us. Now we're asking the same of you." Robert's voice was calm, but his hands trembled slightly. "I have nothing to hide. My wife," he paused, correcting himself, "Elena made mistakes before she came here, but she's gone now, and I had no part in whatever happened." Trudy Lawson crossed her arms. "Gone, or did she take what she wanted and leave you behind?" The words cut deeper than she knew. "I don't care about the money," Robert said quietly. "I care about the truth." But truth in Willow Creek was a fragile thing, easily twisted, easily drowned in gossip. By the end of the meeting, the board voted to suspend him temporarily while an internal review took place. The man who once ruled the neighborhood now found himself locked out of his own office. Days turned into weeks. Robert's phone calls went unanswered, the neighbors turned away, and the whispers grew sharper. He started spending his nights walking through the quiet streets of Willow Creek, passing the houses he once protected, hearing laughter from windows that once welcomed him. Everywhere he looked, he saw her. Elena on the porch, watering flowers. Elena at the clubhouse, smiling over her shoulder. Elena in the reflection of his living room window, just for a second, gone the moment he blinked. He told himself it was memory, not madness, but the line between the two began to blur. One rainy afternoon, a detective named Carla Mendes arrived at his door. She was sharp-eyed and calm, the kind of person who spoke softly but carried unspoken authority. "Mr. Hale," she said, stepping inside, "we're reopening the case involving your wife, or rather, Elena Marks. We believe she may still be in contact with someone from this community." Robert frowned. "You think she's here?" "Not physically," the detective said, "but someone's helping her. We traced a series of encrypted messages sent from inside Willow Creek. The last one went out 2 days ago." Robert's pulse quickened. "Messages to her?" Carla nodded. "We can't confirm yet, but whoever sent them used a private server connected to HOA administrative accounts." His stomach turned cold. "You're saying someone from the board?" "We're not ruling it out." She placed a small recorder on the table. "Mr. Hale, did your wife ever mention a man named Marcus?" Robert froze. That name again, the one she'd whispered during those late-night phone calls. He nodded slowly. "Once I thought he was a friend." Carla's eyes narrowed. "Marcus Dean, former accountant at her previous company. He vanished around the same time she did." So they were working together. We think so, but here's what's strange. His name showed up in a property transaction last month. A purchase under a fake identity for a house just 5 miles from here. Robert felt his chest tighten. You're saying he's nearby? Carla nodded, and possibly so is she. That night Robert couldn't sleep. The storm outside rattled the windows, but it was the storm inside him that kept him awake. He sat in the living room holding the locket again. Inside was a tiny photo of them from the wedding, smiling, radiant, unaware of the disaster ahead. Then he noticed something strange. The back of the locket wasn't smooth, there was a tiny ridge along the edge. When he pressed it, a hidden compartment opened, revealing a folded piece of paper. It was an address. And beneath it 2 words, trust no one. The address was in Millcrest, a small industrial area just outside town. He knew he should have called Detective Mendes, but something inside him, the same part that still loved Alina, told him to go alone. The next evening he drove to Millcrest. The area was deserted, warehouses, shuttered stores, the hum of distant trains. The address led him to an old printing shop, long abandoned. The door creaked open with a push. Dust floated through the beams of moonlight as Robert stepped inside. At first it was empty. Then he noticed a small pile of papers on a desk, invoices, receipts, and fake IDs, all with different names but the same face, Alina. And under those papers a passport. With her photo, her real one. The name read Alina Marks. His heart pounded. It was proof she'd been there, but it also raised a darker question. If she'd gone through the trouble of leaving him, why leave the trail behind? Then from the back of the room, a floorboard creaked. Robert turned. A shadow moved. Robert, a voice whispered, don't turn around. It was her. That same voice he'd dreamed of hearing again, trembling but unmistakable. Alina. She stepped into the light wearing a dark coat and a scarf that barely hid her face. Her eyes were the same, soft, tired but full of guilt. You shouldn't have come, she said. I had to, Robert said, his voice breaking. You left without a word. They think I helped you. I know, she whispered, and I'm sorry, but I didn't take the money, Robert, I swear. He wanted to believe her, but every piece of evidence screamed otherwise. Then who did? Alina glanced toward the door. Someone from your board, the same person who's been helping Marcus. Robert's breath caught. Why should I believe that? Because, she said softly, they're the ones who sent the letters. They're the reason I ran. He stared at her, searching for the truth in her eyes. Then come back, clear your name, we can face this together. She shook her head. It's too late for me, but not for you. You have to find out who's behind it before they destroy you too. Footsteps echoed outside, approaching fast. Alina's eyes widened. They found us. Before Robert could react, she pressed something into his hand, a flash drive, and whispered, this has everything. Trust no one on that board. Then she ran toward the back door as headlights flooded the room. 2 men in plain clothes entered, shouting for her to stop. Robert tried to follow, but they grabbed him, mistaking him for her accomplice. By the time they realized who he was, Alina was gone, again. Back at home, Robert sat alone at his desk, the flash drive glowing faintly beside him. He hesitated, then plugged it in. Hundreds of files appeared, emails, invoices, financial records, and buried deep inside a folder named HOA Internal, there was a list of accounts with familiar names. Daniel Cruz, Trudy Lawson. And at the top of the list, Robert Hale. But his name had been used as the approver for every transfer. Someone had been forging his signature to move money offshore, using his login, his authority, his trust. His world tilted. He realized now that Alina hadn't just been hiding from her past, she'd been running from a setup. And someone inside Willow Creek was still pulling the strings. He printed the files, each one tightening the knot in his chest. The flash drive suddenly felt heavier than gold. But as he looked closer, he saw something chilling, a timestamp on the latest transaction. It was made just 3 hours ago. From inside his own house. Robert grabbed his phone and called Detective Mendes, but before he could speak, the lights flickered and went out. The house fell into darkness. Outside, he heard a car engine idling softly like before, then a sound, the faint metallic click of a camera shutter. Someone was watching him, again. He moved quietly toward the window, peering through the blinds. The same dark car was parked across the street, headlights off, but this time the driver's face was visible in the glow of a phone screen. Daniel Cruz. Robert's pulse raced. He opened the door and stepped outside, but by the time he reached the street, the car sped off into the night. He stood there in the rain, heart pounding, as realization settled in. The man who'd accused his wife might have been the one working against them all along. The next morning, he went to see Detective Mendes in person. He handed her the flash drive and the printed documents. She reviewed them carefully, her expression unreadable. "If what you're saying is true, this isn't just about your wife's past," she said. "This is a laundering network hidden under HOA maintenance funds, and your board members might all be involved." Robert nodded. "Then we stop them." Carla looked up. "We will, but you need to stay out of sight. If they know you have this evidence, you could be in danger." He agreed, but deep down, he knew there was no way he could stay passive while the truth remained buried. That night, he returned home and sat at the window again, the same place where he used to watch Alina tend to her garden. The rain had stopped and the world was silent. He held the locket once more, tracing his thumb over the hidden words, "Trust no one." For the first time, he finally understood. Because the danger wasn't just in the shadows outside. It was inside Willow Creek, among the very people who smiled at him every day. And somewhere out there, Alina was still running from the same truth he was about to uncover. As he turned off the light, a single thought haunted him. If she'd lied to protect him once, how many more lies were still keeping him alive? By the next sunrise, Robert Hale was a ghost in his own neighborhood. People waved politely, but their smiles were tight, their conversations brief. Everyone had heard whispers about the missing funds, the police visits, the mysterious flash drive. To them, Robert was either a fool who'd married a criminal or a man who'd been part of the con from the beginning. Either way, no one trusted him now. But Robert didn't care. He had one mission left: uncover the truth no matter the cost. He spent hours at his desk, combing through the files from the flash drive. Each document painted a clearer picture: transactions routed through fake landscaping contracts, repair budgets that didn't exist, and maintenance invoices for projects that had never happened. Every path led back to one name: Daniel Cruz. But Robert also noticed something stranger. Trudy Lawson's approval stamp appeared on nearly every form. That meant she was either complicit or terrified. He decided to find out which. That evening, Robert walked to Trudy's house. The curtains were drawn, lights dimmed. She opened the door just a crack when she saw him. "Robert, you shouldn't be here." "Trudy," he said quietly, "I know about the fake accounts, the missing money. I saw your name." Her eyes darted around nervously. "You don't understand. I didn't have a choice." "Then help me, tell me who's behind it." She hesitated, then sighed, pulling him inside. "Daniel started it. After your wife disappeared, he said we had to restructure the HOA's books. He handled the transfers, said they were for security upgrades, but then he started threatening us." "Threatening how?" "He said if anyone talked, he'd expose everything, that we'd all go down with him." He had proof, Robert, real proof. "Proof of what?" Trudy's voice dropped to a whisper, that Alina wasn't just hiding from her past, she was part of his plan. Robert froze. She reached for a folder on her table and handed it to him. Inside were printed emails between Alina and Daniel, dated months before she'd married him. The messages were vague, but one line stood out. "If I'm inside, he'll never suspect a thing." Robert felt the world tilt. Trudy placed a trembling hand on his arm. "I'm sorry, Robert, I think she loved you, but you were always part of their plan." He walked home in silence, rain beginning to fall again. The world blurred through the raindrops on his windshield, and with every mile he felt more like a man unraveling. He wanted to throw the folder away, pretend none of it was real, pretend Alina's love hadn't been a disguise. But he couldn't. Because even through the betrayal, he still remembered her voice, the softness, the warmth, the fear. And something about that last night they met didn't fit the story Daniel was selling. If Alina had truly used him, why warn him? Why give him the flash drive that exposed Daniel? Unless she turned against them. Unless Daniel was trying to silence her too. The next day, Detective Mendes called. "We traced the offshore accounts," she said. "The main funnel was created using your credentials, Robert, but the authorization came from a secondary account, one created by someone named Marcus Dean." Robert's heart pounded. "So he's alive?" "Yes, and based on the transactions, he's still in contact with someone local. We believe he's meeting Daniel soon. We'll move in then." Robert hesitated. "Let me help." "Absolutely not," she said firmly. "You've already risked too much." But Robert had already made up his mind. He wasn't going to sit back and watch from the sidelines, not when the woman he loved might still be running for her life. That night he parked outside the old Millcrest warehouse again. The storm had cleared, replaced by a pale moon that painted everything silver. Through the cracked windows he saw two men, Daniel and another man he didn't recognize, arguing near a desk. Daniel's voice echoed through the space. "She was supposed to disappear, you said she was gone." The other man, tall, thin, with a trimmed beard, snapped back, "She was, but someone helped her, someone close to you." Robert felt a chill crawl up his spine. Marcus Dean, it had to be him. Daniel slammed his fist on the table. "We can't move the next batch until I'm sure she's out of the picture. If Mendes gets her hands on that flash drive, we're done." "She won't," Marcus replied. "Our inside contact already took care of it." Inside, Daniel frowned. "Who?" But Marcus didn't answer. That was when Robert's foot slipped slightly on the wet concrete. The noise echoed through the empty lot. Both men turned. "Who's there?" Daniel barked, grabbing a flashlight. Robert ducked behind a stack of crates, heart hammering. The beam of light swept past him once, twice, then stopped. A shadow moved behind him. Before he could turn, something hard struck the back of his head. When he woke, he was tied to a chair inside the warehouse. His vision blurred, but he recognized Daniel's cold smirk. "Well, well," Daniel said, "the great Robert Hale, I should have known you wouldn't stay quiet." Robert groaned, struggling against the ropes. "Where, Elena?" Daniel laughed. "You still think she's innocent? She started this with Marcus. The two of them planned everything, using your position, your accounts, your trust. You were the perfect cover. She told me you framed her." "She told you whatever she needed to," Daniel sneered. "The truth, she ran because she got greedy. She took her share and vanished before we could stop her." Robert stared at him, eyes burning. "You're lying." Daniel leaned closer. "Maybe, but if you really want to find her, she's been reaching out again, trying to expose us. If you see her before I do, tell her I'll finish what she started." He turned to Marcus. "Get rid of him." Marcus dragged Robert toward the back door, rain pouring again outside. But as they stepped into the alley, a sudden flash of red and blue lights illuminated the walls. Police cars. Detective Mendes emerged from one, shouting, "Hands up now." Chaos erupted. Daniel bolted toward the opposite exit. Marcus shoved Robert aside and ran, vanishing into the darkness. Officers tackled Daniel before he could reach the street. Mendes rushed to untie Robert. "You shouldn't have been here," she scolded, breathless. "I had to see it for myself," Robert said weakly. "He said Elena was reaching out again." Mendes nodded grimly. "We found evidence she's been sending encrypted messages from multiple locations. We think she's trying to expose everyone involved, including Marcus." "So she's alive?" "Yes," Mendes said quietly, "but we don't know for how long." Later that night, Robert sat in the back of an ambulance, blanket draped around his shoulders. He watched as Daniel was loaded into a patrol car, face pale, eyes hollow. "Justice maybe, but not peace." He turned to Mendes. "What happens now?" "We'll trace Marcus, he won't get far," she said. "But Robert, there's something you should know. When we searched Daniel's computer, we found something, a list of names, and your wife's wasn't the only one with a new identity." Robert looked up. "What do you mean?" Mendes hesitated. "One of the board members, someone still active, was working with them. They used the HOA to move the money to keep it hidden. Elena found out, and that's why they went after her." "Who?" She looked away. "I'm not sure yet, but whoever it is, they're still out there." When Robert returned home, the house felt colder than ever. He poured himself a drink and sat by the window, staring at the empty street. Then faintly he saw it, a small figure standing across the road. a woman wearing a long coat watching his house in silence. He stood quickly, heart pounding, "Elena." But before he could step outside, the figure turned and disappeared into the shadows. He ran after her, barefoot in the rain, but the street was empty except for a single envelope left on the front porch. Inside was a note written in her familiar, elegant handwriting. "Don't trust Mendes, she's not who she says she is." Robert stood frozen, the paper trembling in his hands. Detective Mendes, the one person he thought he could trust, now part of the same web of deceit. The rain poured harder, thunder rolling in the distance. He looked down the street, every house dark, every window a pair of watching eyes. He didn't know who to believe anymore, his wife, the police, or anyone at all. But one thing was certain. The truth about Willow Creek was far from over. And the next time Elena appeared, it wouldn't be to run. It would be to end it. By the time the first light crept through the kitchen blinds, Claire sat alone at the table, a mug of untouched coffee cooling between her trembling hands. The night had been endless, filled with whispers from the past, police sirens fading into the distance, and the weight of a truth that could no longer stay buried. The neighborhood was silent now, too silent. The HOA members who once smiled politely when she passed now avoided even looking at her house. Her picture was already spreading online, HOA President's wife exposed as former con artist. Some called her a monster, others a survivor. Claire didn't know which one she really was. The front door creaked open. James stepped in, his uniform slightly disheveled, his eyes hollow from a night of questions and disbelief. He closed the door quietly as if afraid to break the fragile air between them. "Claire," he said softly. She didn't look up. "Is it over?" He hesitated. "The agents took Mark in. He confessed everything. He said he used your past to blackmail you into helping him cover up the HOA fund thefts." Claire's voice cracked. "I didn't want any of this, I just wanted to start over." James pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "You should have trusted me, you could have told me the truth." Her eyes finally met his, red, weary, full of regret. "Would you have believed me, the woman who changed her name, forged her past, and pretended to be someone she was?" James looked down. "Maybe not at first, but I loved you, Claire, I still do. That's what makes this hurt so much." The sound of those words shattered her more than any accusation could. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, "I thought marrying you would erase everything. But lies don't disappear when you bury them, they grow roots." James reached into his pocket and slid a folded paper across the table. Her heart froze. "What is that?" "Your statement," he said. "The FBI gave you a chance to cooperate. You helped them trace the stolen funds, testify against Mark and his network, and you'll get a reduced sentence, maybe even probation." Claire's fingers trembled as she unfolded it. Her old name stared back at her, Clara Monroe, the name she swore she'd never see again. "I guess she's back," she whispered. James's eyes softened. Maybe she never really left, maybe it's time to let her live honestly. A single tear hit the page. "I don't deserve forgiveness." "Maybe not," he said, "but you deserve a chance to stop running." The silence that followed felt almost sacred. Outside, the morning sun brushed against the rose bushes she'd planted last spring, roses that had wilted under too much rain yet somehow still stood. She looked at them now, realizing they mirrored her own life, broken, bruised, but still there. "I'll sign it," she said finally. James nodded. "I'll be here when you do." For the first time in years, Claire felt the faintest spark of peace flicker inside her. She picked up the pen and wrote her real name, slowly, deliberately, like she was reclaiming every piece of herself that fear had stolen. When it was done, she exhaled a long, shaky breath. "It's strange," she said quietly. "I thought the truth would destroy me, but it feels lighter than the lies ever did." James stood, walked over, and placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "That's because the truth always does." As he left for the precinct, Claire walked outside. The air was cool, carrying the scent of wet grass and morning dew. The neighborhood watched from behind curtains, whispering stories they'd never truly understand. She didn't care anymore. Walking to the edge of her garden, she knelt by the roses. Beneath one of them she'd buried something long ago, a small tin box with fake IDs, burner phones, and old photos from her life on the run. She dug it up, her hands stained with earth. One by one, she burned each piece in a small metal bowl until all that remained was ash drifting into the morning wind. It wasn't redemption, but it was a beginning. When she stood up, she looked toward the HOA office at the end of the street, the same building where her lies had once felt safe. Now it was empty, police tape fluttering like ghosts. She turned away and walked back inside, closing the door behind her gently, like sealing a chapter that had finally reached its end. Hours later, as she packed a small suitcase to leave town temporarily, her phone buzzed. It was a text from James. "Whatever happens next, don't let your past define you, let it remind you." Claire smiled faintly, the first genuine smile in years. She typed back, "Thank you for seeing the real me." Then she stepped outside, suitcase in hand, and walked down the same street where she once pretended to be perfect. The neighbors stared, the whispers followed, but she didn't hide this time. She walked toward the sunrise, no longer the wife who married an HOA president to hide a crime, but a woman who finally stopped being afraid of her own name. And somewhere behind her, the roses swayed gently in the morning breeze, still blooming, still alive, just like her.